Hello, and welcome to this discussion on my channel, Purple Riolu. I'm Maddie, and I am joined by um, Liz and
Hey,
Adam
Hello.
to discuss The Boy and the Heron, the newest Studio Ghibli movie.
Mm.
So, because we got opinions, so yeah, but. First, I'm going to start us off with a little icebreaker question
Mm.
to get us in the Studio Ghibli mood. So, I want to know what y'all's favorite Studio Ghibli movie is and why. Whoever wants to go first.
Man, that's a loaded question because at least for me, I don't know how you guys feel, but it honestly depends on which one I've seen the most recently is my favorite. Uh, but I think one that I keep going back to is Howl's Moving Castle. I just love the balance of like the whimsical and the kind of like the dark side also of that film. The storylines about war and destruction, but also like creation and love. And yeah, I just feel like there's so much to unpack in Howl's Moving Castle, and the voice cast both in the English and the Japanese dubs are outstanding. So I would say Howl's Moving Castle, and then I can also never say no to Kiki's Delivery Service, but I would say Howl's Moving Castle is probably my number one.
Yeah,
hmm,
those are really good.
Mm,
yeah, that's honestly the same for me as
mm.
well. I've probably seen Howl's Moving Castle over 20 times. It's like one of my low-key favorites.
Yeah, it's just so good.
It
I,
is.
it's I think it's like weird because it's so comforting. I think aspects of it. I mean, there's always the cooking and the food, and it just feels like cozy and warm.
Yes.
But then you're like, oh, like there's a serious war happening and people are getting hurt and dying, and
Yeah.
but it they don't shy away from that, but I also like that that's not the important part of the movie.
Mm. Yeah, I know. And I like the war aspect because it's
Mm.
very similar to I'm trying to remember if it was Miyazaki has a lot of World War II references in his movies.
Mhm.
And the whole bay bombing and like when the ship is coming in,
Mm.
that was a key point in World War II in Japan. I just don't
Mhm.
remember what event that was.
No, totally. And I mean, I don't know how you could live through something like that and not have it be totally affect everything that you work and create. Um,
Exactly.
and yeah, and I think for that reason, I also like Nausicaa, um, and Princess Mononoke, because those are also dealing with that, but Nausicaa more so I think than Mononoke kind of really deals with the consequences, I think, of war, and what that looks like for children and for generations like going forward. And also Nausicaa of the Valley is just Dune, right? Like it's Dune.
Yeah. Yeah, and Nausicaa is one of the so underrated, unheard of Ghibli movies.
Mm,
Because it was banned in the US for so long because it was so war heavy and so
right.
dark.
Mm,
But it's such a beautiful film.
yeah, absolutely. Um yeah, it's such a shame. I think that not a lot of people have seen it because, again, the voice cast for it is incredible. I think you have
Mhm.
Patrick Stewart in it. You got is Shia LaBeouf in it? I think Shia LaBeouf is in it. At least in
I don't know.
at least like voice or the English voice casting, but yeah, it's criminally underrated, and yeah, I think people go to other ones, but I feel like everyone that has their favorite Studio Ghibli film, unless it's like My Neighbor Totoro, thinks that they have the most underrated favorite.
True. But Nathaka is truly the underrated one.
For sure. And yeah, I think when it came out, I think that and Castle in the Sky, I think are super influential. I think for
Hmm.
American animation, but also for American like storytelling. I think there's a profound
Exactly, yeah.
impact, and I think it affects a lot of uh, Western science fiction, survival horror, psychological horror stuff that I think comes along in the decades after. You have stuff like Akira, and then you have stuff like Gundam, and so on and so forth. But
Mm,
yes, super underrated.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, while we're on the topic of underrated, this isn't
Mm,
one of my favorites, but or I mean, it is one of my favorites.
mm,
It, um, The Wind Rises.
yeah,
Oh,
That
yeah, that one's good.
yeah. Um, I just really enjoyed the story, and that one,
so cute.
it's um it's kind of different from a lot
Mm,
of the other ones because it doesn't really like tap into like a fantasy or magical
mm,
world
hmm
Hmm.
as opposed to most of the Ghibli movies.
yeah.
But um
Yeah.
my childish answer to this question though, and also the one I most recently watched, My Neighbor Totoro. I'm
So good.
sorry. It's
It's
so
so good.
good.
It's good.
It is. And it's so
It
cute and
Hmm
refreshing.
hmm
yeah. I'll never get tired of it. I just won't. Um
Nor
Same.
I
should you.
like whenever I watch it, it's just so like happy and it just makes me
Mm,
want to get a blanket with the fireplace and the the characters, it's just refreshing. And I mean, Totoro is Totoro.
yeah.
Yes.
So,
They need to make like a Totoro Squishmallow.
Right.
oh my gosh.
There has to be, right?
I mean, they did
They need,
Snorlax, like why not?
like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, I
Right.
could completely see myself with a giant Totoro in my room.
I feel like the problem is that they would sell out in Japan before they could even produce enough to get over to the States. Uh yeah,
Yeah.
I just did a quick Google search and they all look cool, but yeah, no, there needs to be a Squishmallow for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be up at like midnight, like about to hit the pre-order button. Like,
Same.
Yeah, I'm not like a plushy stuffed animal person, but the two things that I would buy, one that I have is I would get a Totoro one, and then I have a Gengar Squishmallow that I got as a gift. So those are the two those are the two that I got or
y-
I would want.
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, they should make one of the little fire guy from Howl's Moving Castle.
Calcifer,
Calcifer,
that would be
yeah.
so cute. Calcifer is one of my favorites.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Let your
he's
bacon
super
burn.
cool. Super cool. Yeah, I have a series of tattoos, but one of my rules for getting tattoos is I generally try to stay away from media things because you just never know, right? Like you never know, that an image or something might down the road turn into something that isn't super savory or whatever. You don't want regrets on your body forever, but the one media thing that I think I would get is a tattoo of Calcifer. Like I just feel like he'd be the one thing. Like I have a buddy that has a bunch of like Marvel stuff and he has a bunch of Star Wars stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's good for you. Like I love that, but I just feel so risky nowadays, like getting media things, and it turns out like an actor isn't isn't the nicest, or whatever it is. But it feels so safe to get something from Studio Ghibli, right? Like there's there's no way that something could be negatively associated with it. And I love the Calcifer character. He's so comfy and cozy, and I like that he eats eggshells.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think
Then
anyone.
his sass.
The sass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It'd be hard to ever get mad at Calcifer, though.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
Mm-mm. Yeah,
Well,
Calcifer's great.
yeah. Well then, I think we've successfully broken some ice.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
do we want to get into the main topic of this discussion, the boy and the heron?
Do it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, I don't know
Mm,
how we want to tackle this.
sure.
I guess I'll start with a little story. Okay. So, I went to the movies with my friend Rachel, and she is not. She's familiar with Studio Ghibli, but she's never watched a Studio Ghibli movie all the way through, but she's wanted to. So, but she's a big anime fan, right? So, I invite her to come see this movie with me, and we watch it, and then we get out, and we're both like, huh, what did we just watch? What just happened?
Yeah.
What? So I was like, probably not the Ghibli movie that I would have someone start out with.
No, absolutely not.
No, not at all.
Because I was confused watching it. Like, I was just thinking, I don't even know what's going through her head and stuff. So she has some questions jotted down. 39 questions, in fact.
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think I read half of those, and I was like, how do you not understand?
So,
And
yeah, it was
yeah.
all just random stream of conscious. Some of it would make more sense if you've seen Ghibli movies. Others was like, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
valid, like, in my opinion, there were some plot holes or
There
things
were.
over-explained, under-explained. Like, there's a lot going on. So that's why I thought this would be a
Yeah.
very interesting conversation to have.
Mhm. Yeah, for real.
So I don't know if we want to start with like the beginning of the movie and just kind of work through it, or whatever we
Yeah.
think of.
I think that's a good idea because all my notes followed that order,
Okay.
Beautiful.
and it's probably easier that way.
Right. We're better to begin than the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, the movie, I didn't really take notes, by the way, so we're just winging it here.
Mm.
The movie starts. So he's moving. So the main character. Oh, I forgot to mention this is definitely a spoiler cast.
Oh yeah.
This is like
Oh yeah, completely.
the biggest spoiler cast warning possible. Just warning, warning, warning. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. So the movie. So the main character is this boy, and there's a war going on.
It's World War II. This is the Tokyo bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's like the first big event is the Tokyo bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, it's implied that So it's this boy and his father. It's implied that he lost his mother, but his dad is with like someone new, and they are like moving to this like place, like kind of like far away, that's kind of in like the woods. This and then uh I don't know how I don't where do we go from here? There's
Yeah.
a heron that
Mhm.
there's a there's a heron, and this is really loose outline.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of like the first like talking point that
Sure.
we want to get to, if you know what
Sure.
I mean.
So
Sure.
let's just talk about this part because there's a lot to break down in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like first you see the mother die in the hospital in Tokyo during the bombing.
Mhm.
This shows Miyazaki's big thing about World War II.
Mhm.
Like this is explicitly World War II. And this creates this big heaviness for the first half of the movie. And it's like no, yes, there's Wind Rises and Pokorosko, but this is and Grave with the Fireflies. But this movie is very heavy about the
Mhm.
World War II aspect in the beginning.
Mhm.
And honestly, you can compare it to Grave of the Fireflies in the first
For
half.
sure. For sure.
Like, that's how heavy the first half is.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And his so Mahito, the main character, he is he's like running to the hospital where his mom, who was injured in I assume a previous bombing raid, um and as he's running there, Tokyo gets firebombed, and he kind of loses himself in the chaos of losing his mom and the firebombing and surviving that. And the added wrinkle is after him and his dad survive, at some point his dad remarries his dead mother's sister, and then they move into the countryside, because his dad owns a airplane manufacturing factory, and they're moving out there to one, move away from the war, and because his I guess his stepmom, I don't know how the legals work in 1940 Japan, but yeah, to live there, kind of almost like in Narnia, right, when the all the kids have to move into the English countryside because London is being bombed. Same idea, right? They're moving for safety, um and this beginning part really introduces two, and I think we'll get there at some point, but introduces two the big themes that Mahito has to deal with. One is learning how to deal with grief and like move on, move past that, and also Mahito has to understand and work. He has to work through his new family dynamic and what it means to like lose a mom, and what it means to regain a new family, and um and it not be like he's like losing the memory of his mother.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
completely.
So
Yeah.
I feel like the beginning, like it really did like set the scene, like you guys were saying,
Hmm.
for a lot of the stuff going on
Hmm.
with Mahito, and all the things that he's dealing with, and and I really thought that like this is like a great topic in general, because it's I mean, World War II like isn't like that part probably isn't going to be like personally relatable to people, but you know, losing your mother, like new family, like all that stuff, like especially as a kid, is like extremely challenging.
Completely, especially at like teenage years, like that's
Mm.
where Mahito is.
Yeah.
Right.
It's heavy. It's completely heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also important to talk about that Miyazaki himself lost his mother, or sorry, his um yeah, his mom. And um at a young age. So I think a lot of
Mhm.
what Mahito is experiencing is a reflection of like Miyazaki's own like pain and suffering and his own memories of kind of what he was going through, and you know parallels like a lot of the losses that he had um as a kid. And I think it's also um that relationship that he had with his mother, I think also serves him in how he creates and treats his female characters that he creates in his other projects. And they're all so like wonderful and strong and brilliant and brave. And you know, from you know Kiki's Delivery Service through you know to Spirited Away, or you know whatever Nausicaa. um yeah, so I think really like this story of the boy and his heron is also representative of how he then views the female characters that he writes, because he's writing essentially what his memories of his mom, and the relationship that he has with her comes out in the characters that he writes.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. And this movie is definitely very heavy on
Mm,
personal reflection,
yeah.
especially as we go deeper into the movie. But this is just a
Mm,
completely a reflection, honestly.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, like this. So the movie is based loosely on another work, like How Do You Live? But Miyazaki said in interviews and like when people have asked him about it, like it's partially based on that work, but it's also very heavily about his self reflection and kind of and I think that's maybe why some people get confused, because it almost feels like there's two parallel stories happening at once. I think there's the literal story that's happening that I think is um you know the How Do You Live? But then I think that there's almost like a meta story happening where Miyazaki is telling his life story. And when the two kind of collide, um are in the themes of like loss and pain and moving forward and letting go and release and stuff like that. So and yeah, so I think it's something that you have to keep in mind when you're watching it, because it's you know this is like the we're talking about how it's like so heavy right now, but also at the same time it's like the easiest right now to understand it. So it's kind of like this catch 22.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
I think it's interesting too, thinking about
Mm.
how long had it been between the last Ghibli movie, like Miyazaki
Mm.
writing, to this?
Ooh,
Do you
Yeah.
that's
know?
a good question. I think it's The Wind Also Rises, right? Is the most
Yes.
Because
recent one?
I believe yeah.
that was
I believe Wind
2013.
Rises. Yeah.
So,
I believe
Yeah.
Wind Rises was his last movie before retirement. Then
Right,
during
right.
retirement, he created this movie. This is his retirement piece.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, is the conclusion of Ghibli, which I'll go deeper into farther in.
Yeah,
yeah.
Because right now, this is just the early parts, but the middle of the movie reflects everything I want
yeah,
to say.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Okay.
So,
yeah, so I mean, I think we got a good beginning if we want to push on into the middle bits.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, after he gets settled in this home and is kind of like establish new life for himself. I think the next thing is his like first introduction to the heron.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And at first, it's just a strange bird that seems infatuated with him for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then things get a little bit interesting.
Yeah,
So,
to say the least.
yeah, I'm trying
Mm.
to think of the time frame. Is this and then he like goes to the school. Is that the next thing? Or does he
Yes, he goes to the school.
Okay.
The father
Yeah.
forces him to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
And
then
then he meets the bullies. And that's when it starts to get even heavier.
Yeah.
Because you see the self-harm, you see the pain of Mahito,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's more of the heron, which I really want to talk about.
Yeah.
So, in Japanese folklore and Japanese literature, herons are a symbol of grief and a symbol of sorrow.
Mm.
And that's why the heron has such a big part in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why there's that big tension. Because we see the heron when Mahito is at his lowest points, when he is sad, when he's in complete grief. It's the
Mm.
heron that's poking at the window.
Right.
that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and you
Yeah.
see that and it gets bigger and bigger till the point where the father forces him to get out of his grief and move on with his life and
Mm.
start going to school.
Yeah.
Then you get, and that part is heavy. It's like the father, the father honestly makes me a little bit mad. It's like
Yeah.
right after the wife dies, he marries the sister, and now they're
Right.
having another kid.
Right.
And he's expecting his 13-year-old child to, okay, you need to follow me, you need to get on with your life, go to school now.
Yeah.
It's like, that's harsh. That's so harsh for a child to bear.
Mm.
And that's why there's that whole self-harm point, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
is because he doesn't want to move on. He's punishing himself for moving on. He's getting bullied. So he hits himself with a rock for self-harm.
Mm.
And that is heavy. Then it's a heron again poking at the window.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely totally agree. I think that um the big thing I think that this work is, and I think you're getting to that point, but it's this idea of generational trauma and how Miyazaki and by extension like his generation of Japanese people had to deal with the consequences and the fallout of World War II and what they experienced. And um yeah, you can totally see how um Mahito feels so alone because it feels like everything else is, moving so fast in his life and moving so far ahead while he feels like he's still stuck um trying to save his mom. And he, can't believe how quick his dad moved on, how quick, his, life has changed and turned upside down. And um he just doesn't have the words or the space even to admit or to say to anybody that he needs help. And yeah, exactly like you're saying, he self harms, and that's his way of asking for help. But instead of getting help, his dad just says like, "Oh, I'll have a talk with the school. It has to be the school's fault." Or the dad does everything but talk to his son and ask why or what happened. Instead, it's like his dad just is like, how do I solve the problem, instead of let's like sit and talk through it. And yeah, and like you were saying, like whenever he feels just so alone or overwhelmed with his grief, like this, that the Heron is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we are getting to the point where things get wild. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Because the
So
Heron.
go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. So then the Heron comes in after he's in his bed with the rock wound.
Mm.
But this time he's talking. He's saying that his mother is alive and he needs to save his mother.
Yeah.
So the boy follows him and he gets engulfed in the toads.
Mm.
And that part was honestly a little bit confusing.
Or yeah.
But I think that was more a creative point of view, less than a plot point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think part of it is, I think Mahito even says in the film that he knows that his mom is dead, but he has to make sure. So I think that's his, yeah, like his motivation, right? Like he just has to rule out every possibility. So that's why he goes. And I think the experiences that he has with the fantastical elements in the movie, like the toads, are his childlike, mind dealing with grief, and how he experiences reality isn't necessarily rooted in reality. And instead it's like, and that's why it's so, everything that happens is so symbolic or exaggerated or so fantastical, because to him as a child, like that's how he's processing his grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And honestly, the toads could be a metaphor to show how he's being engulfed and squished by his grief.
Mm,
You can also think of it that way, which is interesting. So then
Yeah.
the stepmother saves him with a bow and arrow.
mhm.
And trying to remember the other point. Let's see. Then doesn't the boy then craft his own arrow to try to take out the heron at that point?
Yeah. So he starts learning,
Yeah.
and there's a, I think also at that point, right, his the mother, the not his mother, but his mom's sister, however you want to call her, stepmom, whatever you want to call her, um starts falling ill, right? And
Hmm.
um so he decides to visit her or whatever, and he swipes like a pack of cigarettes or whatever, and he like trades it for um information on how to start building the bow and arrow and the arrows.
Oh yeah. That part was funny in my opinion. Just
Yeah,
the old man so desperate to smoke and the old grandma saying no, don't. That was
right.
hilarious in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really great. Um, but yeah, so then he tries to shoot the heron, and it doesn't work out, and until he gets one of the heron's feathers, and
Yes. Yeah.
um and then at the same time he then finds the copy of How Do You Live, and it's like inscribed from his mother, and then that's kind of
Yes.
when the the spiritual journey kind of starts happening.
Yeah. I love that little reference with the How Do You Live book inside the
Mm.
movie. That was such a good Easter egg and such a good foreshadowing, in my opinion.
Mm.
And it's like once you look back and realize that, that's how you start to realize all the key messages that Miyazaki wanted you to take away is after you realize the Easter egg.
Yeah,
And there's
for sure.
something, yeah. You go?
Oh no, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Then I also like the idea about building more on the sorrow and the heron. The whole metaphor about him shooting the heron,
Yeah,
that that is also interesting. Like he's trying to get rid of his sorrow, and you can see how he is basing all of his problems on the heron.
right.
And that is very interesting and shooting down his sorrow and trying to get rid of the problem when it's not the root problem.
Right. Right. And I definitely think that there's a correlation between him hitting himself with a rock and him trying to shoot this heron, right? They're both kind of in their own ways cries for help, but they're both equally futile, right? They don't help him solve the root of the problem. But the heron, I think, fulfills the role that his father ultimately should have filled. Not being shot, but to help him like talk through and analyze and work through his pain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
So this is at the same time that uh then we find that Natsuko is sick, right? Or that's the
Yeah.
next thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So while all that's going on, then Natsuko's really sick. And then oh, but then doesn't the heron come back? And then there's the thing with the tower.
Yeah. Or maybe the tower was a little bit earlier. I don't remember.
Because
But
the
yes, some
heron
point.
made an imitation of his mother. Like he
Yeah, that's a little bit that's later, I think, right? Like he first sees the tower when he first gets there, right? And he gets led over there, and then when he comes back for like evening tea or whatever, she tells him the story of the tower and how he shouldn't go there. And then the stuff that you're talking about happens after his mom
Yeah,
or the Natsuko gets sick.
yes.
yeah.
And
So
then
I
yeah, with
think the
the imitation of the mom.
stepmother, yeah, I believe the stepmother gets sick.
Yeah.
Then, um, so during that, he interacts with the heron again and and I believe he shoots him at that point. I don't know.
Uh, yes. No. Yes.
And
Or
then at the same
hmm,
time, the stepmother disappears.
yeah, I think the stepmom he sees his stepmom go into the woods, and then everyone's like looking for her, and then he follows in with that other maid housekeeper lady, and while when he goes when he gets there, the heron tells him that he's like invited inside or whatever, and he goes in, and then he shoots the heron inside after he sees his mom's like the fake mom on the couch or whatever, that's like a clone or
Yes.
whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hmm. And so then he shoots him, and because he has the arrows made with the feather, it hits him in the beak, and then it turns him into that like it stops him from being like a heron, and now he's like this weird human
Okay.
uh hybrid thing.
Yes. That's the point that Rachel and I looked at each other like, what on earth is this
Yeah.
movie? What is
Yeah, honestly, same.
it?
Hmm.
It kind of made me a little uncomfortable seeing the like corpse head of the heron just lifeless with this
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I think
And
that was
mhm,
the point. Whoops. Sorry, you go.
mhm. No, you got it. You got it.
Okay. I think that was the point where I had to pull out Google Translate because I watched this in Japan with no subtitles. So
Yeah.
this was the point where me and the few people that I invited, we all pulled out our Google Translate because we had no idea what was going on. Like we could get
Mhm.
everything before that, but
Yeah.
everything after that's like, okay, help. And the poor dude next to us, he was glaring at me
Oh no.
like it was just this older Japanese guy. And he was just giving me a look the whole entire time.
Oh no.
And I could feel him whispering baka and gaijin.
Oh no. Yeah, I lucked out in that I was able to see it in both English and in Japanese with, subbed and dubbed. Um so I was at least a little bit more uh I wasn't as lost at least on my English watch through. Um, but kind of the way that I understood it and how I interpreted it is almost like um he's like a mythological spirit guide, right? Like he gets charged by the wizard slash Luke Skywalker slash
Miyazaki.
Dumbledore. Yeah, Miyazaki to kind of lead him through to the afterlife. So he becomes almost this like demigod, trickster god sort of guide. Um,
Hermes.
yeah, exactly. Hermes, Odin, you name it. Yeah, so that's kind of how I saw him represented, right? Like um he couldn't be um he couldn't be a guide as a bird. And I think that was intentional because I think Miyazaki was trying to really point towards this idea of um talking and working through and like how to work through suffering and grief, and by personifying the heron, the representation of Mahito's grief, it kind of gave a voice to his pain, and he was able to like talk and work through it. And I think that that's what it was representative of, and the him taking off the like the head of the heron and becoming more human like was I think Miyazaki trying to literally unmask grief.
Oh, yeah. I never thought of it that way. But that makes a lot of sense with the mask coming off.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it shows that like you don't have to you don't have to hide from that, right? Like it's not something that's mystical or anything like that. Like grief is grief, and it happens to all of us. But how we like work through it and talk through it is um how we begin on that path of grieving. But what did I'm curious, what did your Google Translate say um when you pulled it out?
I'm trying to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Thing is, it was cutting in and out. Google Translate
Sure.
is not good whatsoever
Not the best, yeah.
for live conversations. Like
Okay.
photocopy and text, it's brilliant, but
Brilliant.
everything else,
Yeah.
no.
Oh, that's so tough. That's tough. Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's
That
totally
was
fine.
smart though.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good call.
Yeah.
They're very brave to not only go to see it without, subtitles, but to to pull it out. I don't know if I would have been brave enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Funny.
luckily there were hardly anybody in the theater.
Oh, that's
It
crazy.
was just like the dude yeah, it was just like the dude next to us
Next to you.
and a
Okay.
couple people in front of us. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good.
They're like, ugh, those
Yeah. It
English
was
speakers.
showing. Yes. Like this movie has been showing for almost a year, in Japan.
Oh, really?
This
Okay.
was like the last showing. Yeah. So
Okay.
like 3 months ago, it was showing like 4 times a day, at like all
Yeah,
times of the day.
yeah.
And now it was only showing at like early in the morning or like 10 o'clock at night at the last showing. So 1 or 2 showings a day. So,
Interesting.
but that's off topic.
It, well, it makes sense though that because I was thinking while watching it because I didn't know you did that. I was thinking, how did you know what was going on in this movie? Because I watched it in English, uh,
Hmm.
and which I think the voice actors did a great job and
Yeah.
everything was
Mhm.
great. I think that's something for all Ghibli movies, really, subbed and dubbed.
Yeah.
I think you can't go wrong
Great.
either way.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong. Yeah.
Mm-mm, no.
Yeah.
Totally, totally agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so funny because at least in the States, like, so I saw it opening weekend, but that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So that's really funny, the difference, but it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I went
And
this past weekend, and
Hmm.
it was pretty full actually.
Yeah, I was very
yeah,
excited that my theater was packed, and I was surprised that there were a lot of like young kids too, like little kids.
seriously, young kids?
Yeah, like
Wow,
eight,
that
like 8 to 10.
those have to be some hardcore um anime parents though. You don't
Yeah,
take you wouldn't take your kid to a Ghibli movie if you didn't know what Ghibli was, though.
right. Yeah, and I guess maybe they were expecting a like I don't know a My Neighbor Totoro or something, but I was like there were some points in
Ponyo.
the movie, yeah, Ponyo. I was like, yikes, this isn't Kiki's Delivery Service or whatever. Like, there's some there's some stuff happening, but I was also very impressed how engaged my theater was. Like there wasn't a whole lot of like rustling and talking and moving around. Like people were very engaged despite how young it was. Um, and slightly off topic, um, the my movie theater experience also with Godzilla minus one was very similar. There were a lot of people there, despite the fact that in the States it's still only in, I mean, of course, in Japanese with the subs, and but yeah, but everyone was like really engaged. I was like, oh, that's awesome that 2 weeks in a row. I think I saw them back to back. I was like, that's awesome that it's so popular here.
Yeah, I think Ghibli's
Well,
really
that's cool.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I think Ghibli especially is really like getting uh like a new surge in popularity in the US,
yeah, for sure.
at least from my
Yeah.
perspective what I've seen. I mean, like they do Ghibli Fest, which is pretty cool. When they play
Hmm.
like one weekend. Really I haven't gone to it this year. I thought they were still doing it, but the past couple years they do like one weekend a
Yeah.
month, like they play a different Ghibli movie,
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
which is
Ghibli
cool. And
is
then
definitely getting a resurge in popularity,
yeah,
which is
and um like I see like the the DVDs on sale at the store or whatever. They've got all the double packs and whatever, so people
oh,
are
that's
collecting
cool.
them. Yeah,
That's really cool.
Mm.
but before we get back on topic, while we're talking about this, my um at my university, they actually a little while ago they had a showing of My Neighbor Totoro and subbed, and it was actually really cool because it was like completely packed and everyone was just like 100% engaged and like giggling and laughing at all the cute parts and like being like, oh, whatever, when like Totoro and all that stuff. So
That's so adorable.
it
And
really
so cool.
was. I was just like, this is what it was meant for.
Yes, exactly. I just
I
laugh at the
totally
fact that with college students.
I know,
Like
I know.
college students are just big kids, but they don't have that whole thing about being cool.
Mm, for sure. I definitely think, anime has had an awesome resurgence, I think, in the last like 5 to 10 years. I think streaming services has a lot to do with it. Like growing up, I loved anime, but it was like I could only get whatever was on like Toonami, or if I could find like a sketchy website or whatever that would allow me to stream, stuff. But with the rise of like Crunchyroll and HBO Max having all the the Ghibli stuff, I think it's become more accessible for people, and
Hmm.
because it's more accessible, there are people that are such huge, it's so excited to see stuff. And um the pandemic, I think, also was huge for it. I think it gave people, they're like, oh, I have all this time, I might as well take a chance on Demon Slayer or whatever it is. And they're like, oh, I really like this. And then I remember right when the pandemic was easing around in the town that I lived in, one of the first movies that I went to go see was Mugen Train. And I was surprised how packed the theater was. And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm super excited to be sharing this experience with people. um and kind of getting back onto track with Miyazaki's stuff. Like, I think that's what makes his movies so great, is how it speaks to people like across language barriers. It talks to people across cultural barriers, and he's just such a great storyteller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
building off of the Mugen train
Mm,
and Miyazaki connecting the two,
yeah,
that Demon Slayer movie was the first movie to derail Spirited Away on the highest grossing movies in the world.
that's so cool.
Like
Yeah,
Spirited Away had that title since it came out in like 2007, I believe,
yeah,
until that movie, till the Demon Slayer movie came out.
yeah. That's huge.
That to me is shocking and
Yeah.
just shows the impact of Miyazaki.
Mm,
And that is what's amazing about it.
yeah, for sure. And
And
yeah. Well, the during the pandemic is when I discovered Ghibli. I remember I think Howl's Moving Castle the first. Liz
mhm.
became obsessed with Ghibli, and she had watched like Howl's Moving Castle on like repeat 5 times in a row and was like, "Oh my gosh, you've got to
yes,
watch
I
this."
did.
She like
I don't
forced me
blame
to
you.
watch it. I think that might have been the first Ghibli movie I watched.
That's
And then
incredible.
I know we, yeah, I know we did like a Google Meet of
Mhm.
uh-huh.
a couple Ghibli movies.
Yeah, we
I
did
think
that
it
with
was Howl's
Kiki.
Moving Castle. Oh my, yes, Kiki. Yeah, we had a couple COVID parties just watching Ghibli movies.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
and
that's awesome. Yeah, my first, at the risk of aging myself, my first Ghibli experience was, I think, the American TV release of Spirited Away. I think it was on Cartoon Network or something. I remember it like released on a, it was like a Friday night or something, and me and my friends were super psyched, and we watched it. We watched it as it debuted, and then they did like a re-showing like right after, and we sat through both of them because we were like we just had never seen something like it before. Yeah, this had to have been like, yeah, I don't know, maybe when did it come out? 2001, yeah, so probably 2001, 2002. So yeah, that was my first memory of it. But that's so awesome that you guys were able to do that, and I think why the
Yeah.
streaming is so powerful for the anime medium, because I think the biggest barrier was just accessibility for people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. And it's like I remember my first Ghibli experience was Ponyo.
That's
I
awesome.
was in first grade, and at my school in elementary school, we had Japanese classes like
Hmm.
once a week. So my teacher, she played Ponyo, and it lasted like 5 weeks. We had no subtitles. It was in Japanese.
You just had to figure it out.
And yeah, and that continued on for 5 years like that. So from first to fifth grade, I would watch Ponyo, and I loved it. It's like everybody next to me on the little Japanese on the little carpet, they all loved it as well.
That's so sweet. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's so great. And I think that's also what's so awesome about Miyazaki's like movie storytelling abilities is he relies just as much on his writing as his like atmospheric storytelling, um, where you don't necessarily have to understand what the characters are saying to be able to understand like what's going on, based on the background storytelling, the scenes that he's drawing, the actions of the characters. Like you can follow along even if you don't 100% understand what's happening.
Yeah.
100% completely. Then it's also the soundtrack.
Oh, beautiful.
Like Joe Hitachi, he is absolutely amazing in his storytelling through his soundtrack.
Mm,
Only reason why I understood Boy and the Heron was because of Hitashi's music.
mm,
Because there's so many reoccurring themes
yeah.
that sort of indicated different points of the story. Like, the biggest one is Ask Me Why. That's one of my favorite pieces of his right now, and it's his newest one. So, like,
Mm,
when she passes away in the fire,
mhm,
you hear it.
right.
Then it plays again in the middle, then towards
Right.
the end.
Right.
So you know they're talking about his mother. You know we're talking about grief
Mm,
through that piece.
yeah.
And if you listen to the piece and you go through the score of it, you can see the storytelling of it. You can feel the emotions. Like I'm currently doing it. Um, I play piano, so I've been playing it, and you
That's
can
awesome.
feel the emotion as you play it.
Mm,
And there's storytelling with his music, which I absolutely love.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, yeah, one of my uh Spirited Away soundtrack is my personal favorite,
Yes.
Mm,
especially because of some of those main themes and
Yeah.
everything.
mm.
So, getting back
Yeah. Where are we?
We
on,
got so off
I don't
topic.
even know. I'm here for it though.
So I
Yeah.
think,
Right.
yeah,
All important. All important.
we talked about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, our
I
initial
think
Ghibli experience,
we're
it's vital to the understanding of.
Absolutely. Totally
exactly.
agree.
Which honestly, the more I think about it, I almost wonder if like listening to a discussion like this would be better like before watching the movie so that you can kind of
Mm.
like be like, "Oh, you know what I mean?"
Sure.
Like
Sure.
maybe
Honestly, for keep on going. Sorry, I interrupted.
Mm.
no, you're good. I don't know. Or maybe it's
Okay.
just like watch it, then listen to this and then watch it again. because I definitely
I
feel like I need to watch it again. And we're not
Yeah.
even like
'Cause
halfway
I
through.
feel like I know, and I feel like all the reviews that give this movie such a bad rap are the newcomers to Ghibli.
Yeah.
And the newcomers to anime,
Yeah.
and I'll be a little bit rude by when I say this, Americans in general.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, they see this movie at face value. They see
Yeah.
Ghibli and they think Ghibli.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they associate that with Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle. They probably never seen Grave of the Fireflies, Wind Rises, Mononoke.
Yeah.
So they only saw the fantasy aspect of Ghibli when there's a
Right.
whole other world.
Mm.
And that is why this movie is getting such a bad rap, in my opinion, and why it's so unfair. Because they only see how it's not a Ghibli movie, that this is not the fantasy, sci-fi, magical movie that is under this mask of Ghibli.
Yeah.
And it's
So
like, I read, sorry, you go.
oh, you're good.
Yeah. And it took me a couple reviews and a couple asks for me to actually understand this movie. Like I had my own interpretation of it, and I still thought it was a beautiful, amazing movie.
Mm.
But it took, after reading a bit more about it, that's when I actually understood how beautiful this movie truly is.
Yeah,
So I do
totally
completely
understand.
agree with you
Mm.
that people need to rewatch this movie twice and do more searching about it after you watch it the first time. Because you will
Yeah.
never appreciate this movie without understanding it. Because it's such a heavy, heavy movie with so many different layers to break down.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, like, I think it's okay that this might not be for everyone because there's so many people like that I know I could force them to sit through this and then they'd come out of it and be like, what was that? Just 'cause
Yeah,
it's so unique and odd and like there are like a lot of these like underlying themes that are like great and beautiful, but like at the end of the day, like it's it's not your little like feel good like fluffy Hallmark, stuff that like I don't know. It has nothing to
yeah,
do with Hallmark. I just said that. I don't know. Um
I know. But,
but yeah.
but yeah, and I agree with you. This movie, I was going to save this for my like last point, but we're already at this point. This movie was not made to be a continuation of Ghibli. This was not made to introduce people to Ghibli.
Yeah.
This was made for a conclusion to
Yeah.
Ghibli. This is to conclude the masterpiece of what Ghibli is. This is basically to give the hardcore fans that are not wanting to say goodbye to Miyazaki and say goodbye to Ghibli. This is basically Miyazaki saying this this is his last movie he has done and it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And we'll get, if we ever continue talking about the plot, we'll get there
Yeah.
and it'll be a lot more understood.
Yeah. Totally. I
But
totally agree. And yeah, the point that you made about Western audiences not understanding is I think something that I've been shouting from the mountaintops for ever since I like became a really big fan of anime, and why I think I like anime so much is that there's a fundamental difference in Eastern storytelling that there is in Western storytelling. And in Western storytelling, it's like, okay, here's the plot, and they might use some allegory. There might be some some fantastical elements, but fundamentally, you get from point A to point B. And when you think of the Western fantasy, you think of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien and Narnia and things like that. And there's such a depth there, but everything that they're talking about is linear, right? And in Eastern
Hmm.
storytelling, that's not necessarily always the truth. There's so much more symbology. There's so much more um, things don't mean what they mean at face value, and you have to have an understanding of what is the artist trying to say. And I totally agree with the point that this movie is Miyazaki saying goodbye. And I think part of the issue that people are having with like understanding it is films like like Princess Mononoke, or Castle, Castle in the Sky, whatever. um there's a very clear message that Miyazaki is trying to convey to somebody else. Like, he has a very clear point that he's trying to get across. But
Hmm.
in this one, he's making it for himself, right? Like, he
Yes.
doesn't care. Like, he doesn't care. I mean, he does care, but he doesn't care to share his point, right? Like, he's doing it for himself, and whatever you get out of it is what he wants you to get out of it. Whatever you experience, whatever you
100%.
you understand, like, that's the point. It's supposed to be, the story is so personal to him, and you'll only 100% know the meaning of what he was trying to make if you're him. And
Yes.
I think that's the hang up. And you think of and there's not a whole lot of like Western movies or stories that are like that. I think the
Mm-mm.
closest you can kind of like come to that is like the movie Inception took so much inspiration from the anime movie Paprika. And even then, it's like they took some like dreamlike sequences into Inception, but they kind of missed the whole meaning of the purposes of dreams in Paprika, and how dreams aren't just a warped reality, but in like Paprika, dreams are just as much reality as reality is. And just like in this one, in the boy and the heron, just as much as things are fantastical, they're also real. And they each of the things that he experiences that are fantastical are expressions of himself, either as Mahito working through his grief and suffering, or it's literally Miyazaki working through his own personal struggles as an artist and as a human.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. I think something else too. I'm looking at some of these questions, and um um I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. As far as I think that both Western and Eastern like
Mm,
storytelling, they do it in different ways,
yeah,
but
for
there's
sure.
something
Yes.
valuable from both.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
something that is like interesting is that I think in Western movies, usually like even like magical elements are like typically like explained. Like
Yeah.
you
Yes.
understand there's a source for the powers, or why did
Right.
this happen? Like
Yes.
it there's a connection point somewhere that's explained.
Right.
So when it
Completely.
comes to a lot of the confusing aspects of this movie, there's a lot of like the Heron guy isn't really like fully explained, or like some of the
Right.
places that they go, like it doesn't like
Right.
it there's no like there's no like character like explaining like
Right.
the history of the world
Right.
in
Right.
this, or this timeline led to this. Like there's none of that, like
Mm,
what you guys are
Yeah.
saying, because it ultimately is up for interpretation, which
right.
I think like initially was kind of frustrating to me because even though I've I haven't seen every single one, but I've seen a lot of Ghibli movies.
Mm,
And even though like I'm familiar with it, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
anime
yeah.
and all of that, I still usually there is a little bit more of connecting points still.
Yeah.
And so that's what go ahead.
Yeah. But that's what Ghibli is.
Mm,
Ghibli doesn't explain everything. And the
right.
thing
No.
is about Miyazaki and about how he works, he creates the storyboard first.
Yeah.
He doesn't, like, he draws out every frame first. Then he goes and creates a dialogue for it.
Mm,
Middle, for beginning and middle. That's how he does it. So, and you have to imagine this movie lands just above the 2 hour mark.
mhm.
Imagine any movie above 2 hours usually does not go well.
Yeah.
So
I
you
mean,
have to imagine how much Miyazaki had to cut
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
mm,
Like, I feel like some of the plot holes could have been easily explained, but those are points that easily can be understood without having it to be explained.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Y-
yeah,
no,
you go.
I totally agree. But I also think that um Miyazaki is also so intentional about what he chooses to leave in and what he chooses to cut out. And as much as I totally agree, I think the movie could have maybe used another 45 minutes, half an hour. Um,
100%.
because because and this is always going to be his. I mean, the one fault that I would give to Miyazaki is that he just doesn't know how to land the plane sometimes. He just, the endings of his movies are always kind of abrupt. um but I think it's intentional because he, as a storyteller, he doesn't want to tell people what he was trying to say. He wants people to try to work it out for
Yeah,
themselves. Just like, when, Mahito is talking to the wizard right at the end, and he says, like, I really have this world built, and I have this, these blocks in this tower built, and I want you to take over, but if you choose not to, that's okay. And if you choose to not, you know, and I think then that translates to like him not only talking to himself as like a younger person, as a young creative, but I think he's also talking to the audience, saying it's like it's okay if you don't understand or grasp what's happening, just as long as you take what you've seen here and move forward, and
100%.
and take out of it whatever you experienced here is what's more important than the right answer.
I never digest that scene that way.
Yeah,
I didn't think of it that
it's my
way.
favorite.
I digested it
Yeah.
from his retirement standpoint,
Oh,
which
for sure.
if
Yeah.
we get to it, I'll explain my reasoning behind that.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause, but yeah, that makes so much sense. And I remember, um, one of me and Maddie's COVID parties was Spirited Away,
Mm. Yeah.
and we were so shocked at the ending
Yeah.
because it's Chihiro leaving the spirit world and Zen
Yeah.
Haku.
Mm.
Haku staying behind, trying to tie everything back together, but they
Right.
never meet again. Like, we
Yeah.
were so shocked at that ending. Like, we
Yeah.
wanted more.
Right.
But that allowed us to create our own ending. Like, it was just
Yeah.
enough of a happy ending where we were satisfied, but not satisfied enough. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of Ghibli is all the movies are like that,
Mhm.
where you can create what you want it to be in the end.
Right. Right. And
Like,
I
you
think
can imagine all of that beauty. Like, you can imagine Chihiro finally meeting Haku again, or you can imagine her not, but moving on with that.
Yeah. No,
And
I
that's
think
the beauty of
that's
Ghibli, is
yeah.
imagining that.
Right. And totally agree. I think that there's and you always have to watch his movies from like a meta aspect and a literal aspect, right? Like in Howl's Moving Castle or whatever, it's like, okay, yeah, there's literally a love story happening. There's, this idea of the rebirth and relife, all these other things, but also what the meta narrative, the outside the movie, what Miyazaki, the story that he's telling is like, if you don't understand or you don't fully see something the first time, go back and watch it again. And
100%.
yeah, and he always leaves you wanting more because he wants you to go back and experience it again. and
Yes.
and that's what he was that's really what I think he was trying to say in The Boy and the Heron, right? Because it's this idea that of Mahito is going back to try to see his mom again, and he does, but she's like a younger version of herself. And when they're trying to escape, he tries to get her to come with him through his door, but she says no. Like I'm glad to be able to meet you for this moment, but I need to go back to my time. And so like how then that translates, I think, to us is this idea that like we get to experience these things in these moments in these times, but we have to go back to our time, and if we want to re-experience them again, we can, but it's never going to be the same like we did, like if we experienced it for the first time, but we're so glad for that experience.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
uh
So,
yeah.
And going back to, actually, this was going to be off point, so you go, Maddie.
oh, no, I was gonna make a little side comment that actually Miyazaki was just secretly a marketing genius because he was just gonna craft these movies that was like, oh my gosh, I have to watch it like 15 times to like get everything. So
Yeah.
I'm either going to the movies 15 times or buying the movie, but either either way,
Yeah.
it works
I mean,
out.
you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Well, and what's crazy is like the marketing scheme for them in Japan was just like, they know who I am, they'll come see it, and they did.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. Like, he
It's
released
insane.
no trailers for Japan.
It's
He
insane.
just
Oh
released
wow.
a movie poster and a date.
Yeah, and people
Wow.
showed up.
But
It's crazy.
yes,
It's like what we wish the Pokemon Company was.
Yeah, for sure.
uh,
Totally. Yeah. So I mean, do we want to get back
We
into
probably should.
yeah,
we
please.
should, because there's so much more little
Oh my
stuff
goodness.
that needs to be digested. I love how we said this was going to be an hour-long
Can't
podcast.
can't
But
do it.
we're
Yeah,
already no,
I
no.
thought
we're
it
already at
was.
like the 2 hour mark.
No, literally. I was like a little like I don't know why I was like, man, like I don't know if we're gonna like run out of things to talk about or
You
like
can't.
if the movie's enough. Oh, it's enough. Oh, it's enough.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, not for me, Zaki. But I mean, I think I think you can generalize, and for the sake of brevity, I think a lot of the middle bits, while I think they're super important, I think the purpose of them and him like trying to find, not only his like the maid, not the maid, but the caretaker, and his stepmom and his mom in those middle bits, is that they help him work up towards finding his stepmom and or
Yes.
his, I don't know, whatever, his husband's wife, and then because he's able to do that, he's able to then face um the wizard who is ultimately himself. So
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, so I mean, I don't know, what did you guys, how did you guys feel about that middle bit? And I think people generally are like, I understood the first third of the movie and I kind of get the last third of the movie, but the middle third really threw me because of the
Yeah.
fantastical elements. So like, how did that guys land
Mm-hmm.
with you?
Yeah. I think the middle bit was just world building
Yeah.
and also Easter eggs towards other movies.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
just more creating a movie, but also I also see it as Mahito going through grief.
Yeah.
Like at first, he's very apprehensive and very still soldum. But through each different little bit of the world, he's becoming happier, he's becoming more confident,
Yeah.
and his character is growing a little bit. Like you don't see the growth, but you can understand there's some sort of growth happening.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what's interesting. You go.
So I agree with what you're saying. I definitely found the middle part to be the most like I was like I think I was following along and now I'm a little bit lost. I'm trying to get myself back on track, but all these things keep happening. The first thing I do want to get y'all's opinion on. So I didn't get this whole thing with the there's like the giant fish and the 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 spirits, the I'm looking it up, the wara
Okay.
wara,
Yes.
the little bubble things that fly to be reborn.
Mm.
I know there's symbolism going on there, but I was like, this is where'd this come from?
Yeah. So I'll try to break down the middle part as briefly
Mm.
as I can because because skipping like the introduction to the world to that part sort of loses a little bit of it. So it's like first after after the heron, he goes to this pelican place in the graveyard.
Yeah.
So I saw that graveyard as a symbolism for his mother's grave. Because a big, big thing in Japanese culture is the graveyards and memorial. Like throughout Japan, you'll see little gravestones and little grave and burial sites and like these beautiful tombs.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what they were trying to get at with that one scene in particular is that's his mother's grave in
Mm.
a way. And that's sort of him, and that's them sort of pushing and stopping that part of the storyline. It's like, it's not explained, but you know there's that big tension about that point. And there's a big tension between him and that point.
Mm.
You don't know why, but I believe if you look at it as a mother's gravesite, it explains it and why that plot sort of ends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. So then you meet the pelicans. The pelicans aren't really explained. Pelicans are just sort of there as a little beast, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like um I see them as those pelicans ended up there by accident. Like they traveled through the doors and now they're just menace invasive species.
Mm.
And they're just little jerks that are menacing.
Which once again, I feel like every Ghibli movie has those little
Those little guys.
yeah. Like
Yes.
what's up with that? It's like the little I don't know what they're called in My Neighbor Totoro in the house.
The suit spirits.
Yeah. And then there's like
Yeah.
similar in Spirited Away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. There's always just some sort of character that is there, but for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you meet the lady, and she does her little firepower whip thing. That's sort of a reference to Howl's Moving Castle, just that
Mm.
animation.
Mm-hmm.
So then you catch the fish. The fish really does not have I don't see it as anything significant. I think it's just food, Ghibli food.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's maybe it's just like the food, but like the processing, it just feels like Spirited Away to me. Um, with like how they cut the fish open and the guts come out, like it just seems like that the bit where she when she's in the bathhouse area, and they're like processing all that food. That's just what it feels like to me. But it's also, like you said, like it's just a very Ghibli Miyazaki thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that whole part of the world is referencing Spirit Away. Because then
Mm-hmm.
you see the shadow people on the boats. And the first thing that I thought about when I saw that was the spirits in Spirit Away.
Mm.
And I almost view that as I feel like the Spirit Away in this world can be connected
Yeah.
almost. Like I feel like those spirits are traveling to the bathhouse. I feel like those are the spirits from the bathhouse. Like
Hmm.
the animation of them look very similar.
Yeah. The
And if you
Ghibli.
think of this as, if you think the spirit world of How Do You Live and the spirit world of Spirit Away, they are very similar. And I feel like the wizard could be controlling, and it's just one big universe. The Ghibli metaverse.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. And there's honestly not a lot to talk about the middle
Oh,
piece.
what
There
about the
really isn't.
stones? When
Mm.
does that come in?
This, the gravestones?
Oh
Or
yeah, we
which
talked about
part?
that. Yeah, but
Okay.
was that with the guy, the universe? Do you know what I'm talking?
Oh, the meteor bright stone. That part?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
Okay, that's a little bit after the bubble people.
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
like the bubbles are just referencing new spirits trying to go to Earth. And that's what I took away from it. And
Mm.
I also, I'm still trying to interpret the middle part a bit more.
Yeah.
Because I really just think it's a Ghibli, just Ghibli being Ghibli, creating world.
Mm.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally agree. Um, and I think the only thing that I would add is I think that it's this middle part is him literally walking through the stages of grief, and
Mhm.
um the steps that he has to take in order to heal. And I think him, waking up in this oceanic world, right, surrounded by water, and in this feelings of like drowning. I think it kind of is representative of him like finally reaching the depths of his despair, right? And the reason that he's, dealing with so much grief is, death, like you were saying, when he gets to that tomb. And I think those pelicans, or are they pelicans? Yeah, they're pelicans. Um, are also representative of other people that are there because of grief and because they lost somebody, right? They're because their whole characterization, right, is they want to one get into the tomb, right? They try to they bum rush it, they try to get in, but then they also go after those spirits that I think are representing being just people that are able to move on past grief. And that's why they're trying, they're trying so desperately to, work their way through um their grief. But in a very literal sense, um in that fishing part, right, he's being taught by Kiriko, um care for himself, right? Like how to eat, how to rest, how to, physically move through the emotional parts of grief. And then once he's got his strength, he's then able to, quite literally take the next steps into facing those creepy birdmen, and then also facing the wizard slash himself slash Miyazaki.
Yeah.
Completely.
Mm.
Yeah. And I just ended up looking up the stages of grief because I forgot it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm looking at it, and this movie really just follows that path. Like,
I
at
was
first, it's. You go?
No, I was just saying, I was literally thinking about that too. Like, I'd be interested to watch it again and through like the lenses of the stages of grief. Because isn't the first one
Yeah.
denial?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, first one's denial, anger, bargaining. And you see that. You really do see that in the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
he's denying himself from re-entering the world. Then he's putting out all of his anger on the Heron. Then he's bargaining it when the Heron says, "Oh, your mother's alive."
Mm.
And then then you can see a little bit of depression in the grave when he finds out his mother's not alive.
Mm.
Then this middle sequence is the combination of depression and acceptance as
Yeah.
we lead towards it more ending bits.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, it really is.
Totally. Yeah,
So,
totally agree.
yeah. So, want to move on past this middle point?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we covered a lot of that point. There's
I
not
think so.
much.
Sure.
Yeah. So then after he meets the pelicans, he he fixes the bird's beak.
Yep.
And once again, that's sort of acceptance. Like
Yeah.
he's trying to repair what he did through his anger.
Mm.
And now they're sort of buddy buddy. The the heron then goes helps him
Mm.
and shows him Tahimi and the parakeets. So,
Mm.
so then they get kidnapped by the parakeets.
Yeah.
And then we are also introduced to the doors, how
Yeah.
they're searching for both him and the stepmother. We get introduced to the father's job of being a World War II mechanic. And we also see how the father he cares about the boy and the stepmother, but he's still so focused on his job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that point you sort of realize you can feel a little bit of the anger of the boy as he realizes my father is not really looking for me. I'm just going to go stay in the spirit world for a bit longer.
Yeah.
And like that's really the big thing about it is the father. And that's what's interpreted a lot in World War II focused and the older anime is that fathers in World War II, they're very war driven, very focused,
Yeah.
and they pressure that on their sons.
Yeah.
And it's like they move forward, they don't look back, they don't look any other way except forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Which,
I feel like that's a reflection of Miyazaki as well, how he must have felt.
Mm.
Because he grew up in World War II and the post World War II world.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah. It probably
yeah.
it goes back to needing space to like be able to process your emotions, and when you have so much going on in your personal life and then also like the whole world around you is very overwhelming. That's a
Yeah.
lot to take in,
Mm,
especially like we said for like a 13-year-old.
yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
I think the other big thing that this movie is about is growing up, and I think part of growing up is realizing that your parents um aren't perfect, and that they're fallible and they make mistakes, um but more often than not that they still do try to care about you, and they would just might not show it in ways that make sense to us as children. And um, I think him kind of realizing that his dad does care, but in a way that's very roundabout and very let's just push forward, like we like he um and I think the dad in and of himself is such a complex character, because his primary motivation is, it feels like to me as like an adult like watching it, being like he's just trying to provide for Mahito in a way that he best can. And like in his mind and in my mind, his character motivation is like, oh, like Mahito needs a mother, like Mahito needs, money for me to provide for him, and he needs, to be away from, the city that's dangerous. And so he kind of like he does, and he makes choices that he thinks is best for him, but in actuality what Mahito needs most is just him being there for him, instead of having those things like given to him. And I think part of his like him going back and experiencing it, and especially like seeing through the doors and stuff, is like him realizing that, and like that's him growing up and maturing and realizing that, like, oh, like our parents aren't perfect, and like while they might try to do what's best for us, they don't always succeed, but that doesn't mean that they love us any less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. Yeah. And yeah, it is. You are completely correct about that. Yeah.
No, it's hard, right? Because it's really, I think that this film, and you've been hitting it on the head, both of you, but like yeah, it's about grief, right? Like, and it's him processing and working through it, both literally like as like a storytelling device through Mahito, but also I think it's him personally dealing with his experiences, like you were saying, growing up in World War II, and post and living in a post World War II world, and um even in the art that he has been making, right? Like when you look at Nausicaa of the Valley, right? Like that's that story is unashamedly like him's lashing out at industrialization and capitalism, and destroying the natural world. And there's yeah he and the pain that it causes others when we like fight and go to war and have anger, um and like contrasted to this one, the point is Heron, I think he's letting go a lot of that anger that he has, and
Mhm.
he's like learning to forgive himself.
100%.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All of
so
his movies have
mhm,
such a big impact on World War II. Like, while you
yeah,
were saying that, I was thinking of Howl's Moving Castle.
yeah,
And that's him reflecting and saying how war is stupid and war is caused by stupid people.
yeah, yeah. And I think that one of the the critiques I think I hear from others the most about Howl's Moving Castle is they're like, oh, like I don't understand like the conflicts, or they don't explain the other countries or the nations. Like I don't understand what's going on, like on that like side of the story. But I think that's on purpose, right? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who the nations are. It doesn't matter, what nationality they are. Like war is bad, and
Yes.
like it's like it's on purpose. And yeah, so he tells you exactly what you need to know, and he doesn't tell you the things that you don't need to know. And that's
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
the interpretation stuff is so important.
Yeah, you don't need
Mhm.
the politics of a pretend kingdom to be
Right.
able to relate it to the
Right.
struggles and conflicts and
Right.
stuff of the real world,
Right,
you know.
exactly.
Or it could even take away from it actually if
Right.
you do over explain the stuff when
Right.
that was never
Yeah.
the point.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Totally
So
agree. Mhm.
so I'm not
So
sure.
moving on.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah, where are we now?
I don't
I
even
think
know.
we're at the parakeet moment.
The
Like when
parakeets.
you see,
Oh yeah.
yeah, the
Um,
parakeets, and honestly, this goes back to the whole world building thing
mm,
and how we don't understand what's the point of war and what's the point of the kingdom.
yeah.
Like we know the head parakeet is something special. We know that he did something great. He won a war, but we don't know why.
Mm,
But and that's like the whole question about is like, what's the point? I know Rachel had a question about that, but why why is that something that you need to know? Like we just need to know that this bird did something good, that he's beloved by this bird kingdom.
right.
Yeah.
And I feel like and really the birds, they don't have a big point, but it's their point is to reflect Miyazaki.
Yeah.
Like the little birds, they are the animators. They are just strict followers wanting to do what is needed to be done with no question.
Mm,
And they just want the kingdom to survive.
right.
Then is the Bird King. He is the head. He is Miyazaki's son. He's the big heads of Ghibli. He wants the kingdom to continue. He wants it to excel. They want to take over. And then, so moving on, we meet the wizard. The wizard is Miyazaki. The wizard is the boy. The wizard created, we learn how the wizard created this big, brilliant, beautiful world, which can be seen as Ghibli.
Mm,
And he he wants it to continue. He does because he put so much time, he put so much effort into creating Ghibli, creating this big spirit world.
yeah.
But he knows that if he, when he is done, when he gives it up, nobody will be able to do it the same.
Yeah.
Because he tried that, Miyazaki tried that with his son. We can see that through Earthsea,
Yeah.
Earwig,
Yeah.
some of the less known Ghibli movies, the bad Ghibli movies. There's no bad
Mm,
Ghibli movies, but not the good ones.
weaker.
Yeah, the weaker ones, especially Earthsea. That's the big one.
Yeah.
It's like they tried to do it on their own
Mm, hmm.
and they failed. They missed all the magic of Ghibli, and they created a little bit of a bad rap of Ghibli. They created, and when you see that through the Parakeet King, you can see that if that's why the wizard does not want the Parakeet King. because he can see that as the king has the wrong ideas, the wrong motivations, and he's going to destroy the world in a big, bad, wrong way.
Mm.
So that's why he wanted to give it to the boy, because he believes as his blood relative, he would be able to handle his role.
Mm.
And we see the building blocks, and those building blocks are, in my opinion, a representation of humanity. How they're just so unbalanced, but balanced enough that it doesn't fall.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
one wrong blow, one wrong block, one wrong anything can cause
Right.
everything to fall and crack.
Mm.
Then you see the boy picking up 2 blocks, and he says, I don't want to have this role. It's full of malice, it's full of hate. And that's a representation of the world. That this world is full of hate, full of malice, full of wrong intentions.
Mm.
And that's why he doesn't take the blocks and doesn't take that world.
Mm.
And there's the zoom in on his scar on his forehead.
Yeah.
That zoom in is a representation of him realizing that what he just said is true about himself.
Mm.
That he was full of hatred, that he was full of malice, and he had the wrong intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I love that interpretation. I think that's I think that that's um yeah, like that's not how I think when I saw it, like I think I had a different interpretation, but I that's what I love about Miyazaki's stuff because everyone is coming at it with like a different viewpoint, but I think it's each viewpoint is like so equally valid. And yeah, I didn't even think of it like a literal like him like working through his real world, passing of the torch, right, to his son. And yeah, no, I think I think that's so great. That's so yeah, no, it's um again, it's so personal to him, right? Like that's it's just him laying out his life, his heart. And yeah, like you either know it or you don't. And those that understand it like can see that meaning, and that's really cool.
Mm,
I agree.
yeah.
Yep, yeah. Yeah. I think on my watch, um I perceived it as um and like admittedly I was very confused about the parakeets.
I
Like
was too.
I was just like I'll accept the parakeets that they're there, and we can just keep moving. We can keep moving forward. But the to me what was so huge was that conversation that Mahito has with the wizard. And to me it represented almost like Miyazaki talking to himself as a kid, saying, and this idea of whatever he does, after this world, when he moves on, whether he in his belief system, if he gets reincarnated or if he goes to heaven or whatever it is in his worldview, um and what he was trying to say in this story, um that in order for him to move forward, he has to forgive himself. And I think part of that, um and part of that is like him realizing that he himself has, like you were saying, that malice inside of him, and he shouldn't let that malice inside of him be his motivating factor. and that in order for him to move on, he has to let go of that and forgive himself of that in order for him to truly move forward and to create his own world. Because by him destroying that created magical world, sure, it's the end of that world, but he is then birthed out of that into quote unquote reality, and he's able to um, make a new world of him for himself. And I think that's represented with the the blocks that he took from that magical realm into the real world, because now he has the building blocks to then start building his own life and his own world and his own reality. And but he was only ever able to do that by saying no, like I don't want to be stuck here. I would, even though I have my mom back, even though I have full creative control of this, I could be a god of my own creation. That's not what he really wants, and instead he wants to go into the real world and to move on and be able to work through, like, I think it's like the end result of him working through his grief and saying that, like, okay, I'm ready to move on. I don't have to live in my own fantasy anymore. I can come back into reality and deal with the things that I have, and there's like
Yes.
a forgiveness
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Going back to the stages of grief, I think that really was like the a key moment of like acceptance,
Yeah.
100%.
that he had to like work through that and
Mm.
just come to an understanding
Yeah.
with himself, his circumstances, his life. It I think a lot of it just all came together for him in that moment.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then we see the wizard's acceptance when the blocks are destroyed by the Parakeet King.
Yeah.
We don't see him retaliating. We don't see him getting angry. He accepts the world's death. He accepts his death. He's not running away. And that reflects Miyazaki in a way, how he is accepting that this world is, that this is done, that he needs to step away and let it go. That he is gracefully letting Ghibli go. Ready?
Mm.
Letting his world that he created go. Because there's no other way to do it. Because the Parakeet King, the sun that had bigwigs, they were the one that destroyed it, not the boy. And that reflects how he didn't want anybody to take it over, because he knew if somebody else took it over, the big bad destruction would happen. And it did.
Mm.
In the movie, at least.
Right.
So that is basically Miyazaki showing the audience why he's retiring Ghibli. Why he's not giving it to his son or anybody else, he's letting it go. And then we see how the boy is shocked by this destruction, that he's mad at the Parakeet King briefly, but also concerned about himself. We can see the boy's reaction as the viewer's reaction to realizing that Ghibli is now done. But then the boy realizes in his pocket he has the blocks in his pocket.
Mm.
And those blocks can represent Miyazaki's message
Mm.
to move on, to live a life of without malice, without hatred. And yeah,
Yeah. That's really bittersweet.
Mm.
it is.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
sort of the thing about this movie. It's bittersweet in the ending.
Mm. Yeah. Totally agree. And yeah, I think my favorite scene in the whole thing is when they're in the doors and they're getting ready to leave. And yeah, like I think I talked about it a little bit earlier, but he like he asks if his mom, would come with him back. But she says like, no, I have to like go to my own time. But I'm so thankful for, the time that we've had together in this, this fantasy world. Um, but I have to go back in order to,
To have
I
you.
right, I have, yeah, exactly. Like I have to leave this in order to have this experience in the future. So yeah, it's yeah, it's yeah, it shed a tear. Like that's
Yeah.
what parenting is, right? Like you're giving up almost like you're be willing to give up anything for your child, even you know you know uh you would give up a present or a future in order to make sure that you have that child, and you're so thankful for the time that you do have with those that you love. And I think that that's so huge for Miyazaki. I think he has devoted so much of his life to his art, and I think he's now coming to the realization that like what he values now more is the time that he has with the people that he loves, and how important they
Exactly.
are to his process.
Yes. And he would
Yeah.
never undo it.
Right.
Like he wouldn't go back and say, I don't want to do this.
Right.
Like the mother wanted to have the son. And we see this, and it's sort of, we don't, it's never said, but you can feel it, that she is proud of her son,
Oh,
that
for
she
sure.
wants her son. And
Yeah.
that gives the acceptance for Mahito and for the viewers that in the end, he got what he wanted. He got his goodbye with his mother.
Right.
Yeah.
He now and he can now move on because his mother is proud of him. His mother wants him, and they'll event. And he had his time with his mother. And going back to the soundtrack,
Mm-hmm.
the Ask Me Why, it played in the fire. It played when Mahito made his decision about the world. And now it plays again at this final point. This is the music storytelling. How it was sadness, then it was power, then it's the conclusion. And
Wow.
that's heavy.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like this song is broken up into 3 different parts on Spotify. It's one, the evacuation, Mother's theme, Mahito's theme.
Yeah.
And they're all the same, and if you play them together, they all flow into each other. But there's all like different little bits. Like the mother's theme is thick, it's heavy, it's sad. The boy's theme, the middle theme is a little bit more mystical, a little bit more uplifting. Then the ending theme is the ending. You can feel how it's sort of concluding it.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of Joe Hisaishi's work combined with Ghibli.
Yeah, that's really, I think, like one of the key aspects of a lot of the greatest movie soundtracks is how they're able to like emotionally like weave from one aspect to the other while still like often having a leitmotif or something
Yeah.
Yeah.
for like the biggest moments to sort of emotionally cue the audience into like the feelings of the characters and what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally agree. And we did it. we got to the end. I mean, yeah. So I mean, there's after they escape, right? There's a brief, almost
Epilogue.
epilogue, sorry. Yeah, prose before. Yeah, epilogue where he they spend, I don't know, was it a couple of months, maybe like a year or so, whatever. His stepbrother, I guess, is born, half brother is born, and
He's
they're going
happy.
back, right? He's happy,
Mhm.
and he kind of like says goodbye to to the room, and yeah, and they're going back to Tokyo, I'm assuming. I don't know. Um,
Yeah,
and then
because
it
it's
just,
like after the war.
yeah,
Yeah. Then we
for
also
sure.
see the book again. We see the
Right.
book. And that
Yeah.
just connects it back all to the beginning.
Right.
And and that how and then now you have to you get this bittersweet ending, you get the ending, but it feels like it's undone. But that's
Right.
because you now have to realize the messages. So like what are the messages? It's how do you go through grief? How do you say goodbye? How do you live? And it's like we see all of these throughout the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you get through grief in the beginning? He is engulfed in his grief, he's engulfed in his mother's life being ended,
Yeah.
and he doesn't move on. Then then we see how do you live in The Wizard. He gave Mahito the choice to take on his life,
Mm.
to continue his life. Then he realizes, I don't want to live that life
Yeah.
because he got to the point where he's accepted that his mother has passed.
Right. Right.
Then we see it when he gives the mother the option to live with him, to come back with him. But she says, no, I want to live the life that led to this moment. That's how I'm going to live. So then it's the ending where he chose to live his life full of joy, to live his life past his mother and
Mm.
accept what has happened. That is the message of how do you live. It leaves us with wondering how do we get through the grief? How do we move on? How are we going to make the life that we want?
Right.
And
Right.
that's Miyazaki's message. That's the message that he wanted us to have is how do we live? How do we move on? And that's honestly a recurring theme
Yeah.
in all the Ghibli movies, but none of them played into that theme as heavy as this one.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add to what you said was I think the way that it ends and the way that this movie starts is so quick and so abrupt on both ends, because I think, like you were saying, like to Miyazaki, he doesn't care how stories or people, begin and end, but what he cares about is like what you do in the middle. And like you're saying, like how do you live? Like how do you make choices? How do you make decisions? And how's the time that you spend? Um, how does that bring fruit to you? Like what is, how do you give yourself? How do you make your life something that you valued? So, and because that's what makes life worth living, then you don't have to worry about beginnings and ends. It's about, that experience in the middle.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
what a an ending, right? Like it
Yeah.
like I know some people, the friends that I went to go see it were like kind of like, yeah, like it was, they felt like it was really abrupt, but I felt like it couldn't have ended any other way, right? Like it felt,
I couldn't.
um right, like it had to be, yeah, like you were saying, like a bittersweet sort of ending.
Yeah.
I
And you made me realize about how he came back to Tokyo. And that just
Mm,
sort of reflects how he's ready to move on with his life and
right.
continue being in Tokyo. And yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
I yeah, it made me realize I think that's something in every Ghibli movie really is like it's kind of this big like circle and it's almost like
Yeah.
that the character ends where they started, but they've
Yeah.
grown like so much throughout
Right.
that.
hmm
Right.
So,
yeah,
yeah. By
yeah,
like
100%.
part of me would love like a little like montage like a couple years in the future, you
Yeah.
know, just to see the characters, but like you guys were saying that's not really the point. So,
Mm-mm.
Right.
yeah.
I think this is like one of the only Ghibli movies where we actually get an ending for the character. Because like you don't really get this epilogue scene
Yeah.
in any of the other Ghibli movies.
That's
Because
true.
in the other Ghibli movies, you don't need that. But this one, you needed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it sort of proves how he's grown older and it's took what he experienced to become a new person.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Totally agree.
yeah, and back to How Do You Live, I forgot to mention how Miyazaki reflects this. And it's like he this is him saying this is how I lived. This
Yeah.
is what I did, and I would never change any of that. And you need to accept that I'm accepting my fate. I'm accepting that this was my life, and now my life is coming towards my end.
Yeah.
And you now need, as the viewers, you need to move on and live your lives with the messages that I left you.
Yeah.
Well,
For sure.
And
Yeah. And
yeah,
yeah, my big takeaway from, the movie and like I think the message, because I shared it a couple times, like I do think that he obviously made this movie for people to get stuff out of it, but I also think that as an artist, he selfishly was like he was making it for himself. And like
yeah,
you were saying, like it's his story. It's him kind of ending his, coming to terms with his end as an artist. And yeah, it's like it just feels so personal to him. And it really the movie felt like him as an artist. He was attempting to kind of come full circle within the movie, especially considering that like we've talked about like throughout this podcast, like the idea that the boy in the heron had like aspects of other works that he's created. But the key difference I think is like in this one, he's like working through the turmoil and stuff that he has as an artist, and instead of letting that frustration and malice, I think, drive his work, instead it's him like forgiving and letting go in his heart. And that act of him forgiving himself of like that anger will allow him to like retire and move on without regrets, and then like thus like completing his circle as an artist. Because I think for a lot of the things that he made, it was um like pain and him processing pain that really drove him in a lot of his work. And
hmm
um but I think him like forgiving himself of that and letting go in his heart is kind of what will make him, I think, fully able to walk away without regrets, because he doesn't have
yeah,
to hold on to that anymore.
completely, yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
That's
And just talking about
Mm.
him retiring, like, I just get this pain in my heart.
Yeah.
It's like, this is my childhood, and
Yeah.
selfishly,
Yeah.
as a viewer, I don't want this to end,
Yeah.
but you have to accept it. And it's like,
Right.
I'm sad that this is ending,
Right.
but I would never have thought of Ghibli ending in any other perfect way.
Right. Right.
Like, this was such a perfect conclusion piece.
Mm. Yeah.
And
For sure.
and I'm so grateful and for Ghibli, and it makes me more grateful and more amazed by Ghibli now
Mm.
than any time before.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think that's why it's so awesome that he's able to go out in the way that he's like stepping away from um the art that he's poured so much into, because I think he's really seeing the fruits of his labor and how much mainstream acceptance and um recognition that anime and animation and the stuff that he loves has been accepted worldwide. And I really do think that he's excited to see how people are going to stand on his shoulders going forward, and how people are going
Mhm.
to expand the medium, and what what's the next, who's the next Miyazaki, who's the next great
Exactly.
studio. And
And
but but I think also part of like the whole wizard thing is he's saying to young people that are coming up, he's like, you don't have to be like me to be successful. You can create your
mhm,
own worlds. Like, you don't have to be like me to be successful. Like, you can go and do it yourself.
yeah. And when you sit here and think about any anime that can compare to
Yeah.
Ghibli,
Yeah.
there's nothing there's nothing truly like Ghibli. Ghibli is one of its own.
Yeah.
Like, there are a couple directors I can say,
Mm.
but they can't compare. It's like Makihito Shinkai with Your Name, Weathering with You, Suzume.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
He
that's the closest.
That's the
mhm.
closest, but still,
Right.
it's not the same
Right.
whatsoever. It'll nev I don't think he'll ever become like, um, Miyazaki. There's nobody that can. And it's like we look at different art styles, like Corner of the World, Marrying the Witch's Flower, trying to think of
Mm.
other ones. Like, still, they tried, but they don't have the same impact. They don't have anything like Ghibli.
Yeah. I
And
I think what
that's
it I think what it shows and like what he's trying to say too is like, the like Ghibli's like coming to an end, but like there's gonna be there's probably going to be more people that try to replicate it, but the most beautiful art I think comes from people just expressing their own
Yeah.
personal experiences, and in the
Right.
way that comes
100%.
out, it's always going to be the most like genuine and authentic.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
I
you can
yeah.
try to recreate something. Like, you can even see that with AI. Like, I look up AI art and anime art for inspiration for my art sometimes
Mhm.
when I hit blocks,
Yeah.
and you can feel the lifelessness in AI art.
mhm. Yeah, that could be
Like,
a whole podcast.
that could. And and the thing is, Miyazaki talked about AI art.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
briefly, I don't remember exactly everything he said, but briefly he said that you can't recreate art through AI because it
Well,
has no emotion, it has no it has nothing.
Something
It's like when you put a you
Yeah, go ahead. Oh. I was just gonna say something that I've like repeatedly said is AI, it's very fun to play with, but ultimately for writing or creating art or music as well, like the the best part of all of those to me is the stories and the people behind it and what they're trying to tell.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
AI just it's only pulling from things existing. It doesn't have an existence or a life to
Right.
try to convey. So it never will be the same as that,
Right.
which is why at the end of the day, certain things I'm not that concerned about, like AI taking over all the industries in the world and whatever,
Sure.
because it just can't.
Mm.
But
I
yeah.
can't.
Right. And I think at the core of what makes Miyazaki stuff work so great is like, yeah, of course, the art style, the music, all of that, but at the core of it, he just has such a grasp on what it means to have relationships with people, with his with his characters, and he just gives them a soul, and you're just like, yeah, like you can't help but fall in love with Howl, and you can't, you just feel like Nausicaa's like rage, and they just feel like real people because he gives them real emotions, and they it just feels so personal. So yeah, I totally agree. Like you can't, like AI
Mm-hmm.
can't replicate that emotional aspect of it, and consequently also then I think the you know the anime and the animated movies that are gonna come are gonna have to emulate that. And I think that there are some things that are out right now that are super exciting to watch because I think you can see Miyazaki's influence, but you can also see them taking it into their own direction. Like right now, I'm very excitedly like watching through Free Ren, and
Yes.
it's like the art style is like kind of there, but like fundamentally like the relationships that all these characters have with each other, they just feel so real and so wonderful, and you fall in love with them. And like that's really what Miyazaki's magic is that he gets you to fall in love with these characters, even characters that are just on the screen for like 2 seconds. You're like, yeah, that's wonderful. I
Yeah.
love them.
I love that show so much. It's so beautiful.
Yeah,
And it's like,
it's so
and
good.
it's so sweet and adorable.
Yeah.
And I always felt that similarity and familiarity with it, but I
Mm,
could never pin a point on it.
yeah.
But Ghibli is a great, it is Ghibli. You can feel Ghibli as
Yeah.
well. Like you can see the little quirkiness and fear or whatever, and
Yeah.
the elf. Like you
Yeah.
can see that little cheekiness that all the
Yeah.
Ghibli girls have.
For sure.
And you can see that sort of world building.
Yeah.
And you can feel the emotion as well.
Right.
And it's beautiful. And
So good.
honestly, Frieren is one of my new favorites.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's
I
like,
need
it's such an amazing anime.
I
It's
need
so
to look
good.
into it.
Then
You got to.
you have to.
It's so good.
It's so
There's
good.
Yeah, there's what 14 episodes out right now, 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And
they're
it's going
releasing
to
weekly.
24.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Yeah.
yeah. Go do
Hmm.
yeah. You'll power through it. It's so good.
Tonight binge. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do it.
And you
Can't
will
recommend it enough.
cry. You will act like,
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
And
Even
you will
better.
cry. Like the whole backstory is
it's so
so
beautiful.
sad.
Yeah, it's so great.
And then the music, Evan Call and Yasobi, they're amazing.
Mm,
And Evan Call is like my second favorite composer for anime next to Joe Hisashi. And something about going back to Ghibli,
Yes.
something about saying goodbye to Ghibli is also saying goodbye to Joe Hisashi.
Mm.
Because he's been there since Totoro. He's been there at the very beginning. And he is also the same age as Miyazaki.
Yeah, I guess I didn't
He's
really.
not.
I didn't think about that. Now I'm doubly sad.
I know, and that's why I'm so sad, is because Joe Hisashi, he's not going to compose music probably anymore. Like, he only composed music for Ghibli. There were a
Wow.
couple standalone pieces, but all of his great pieces for Ghibli. And we're going, and I'm so sad because his line and his influence is also coming to an end.
Mm.
It's like, as a musician, Joe Hisashi is one of my greatest inspirations. Because his composures is so amazing and so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, they've definitely, both of them have left a huge impact.
yeah.
So,
And
Yeah.
I so badly want to see a Joe Hisashi concert at one point. And I
oh,
hope
that would be so cool.
Yeah.
yeah, and I hope I get a chance to before he decides to end it, to stop. Because, like, I saw a couple recordings, like recent recordings of him, and you can see that he's aged. You really can. And that's sad.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because, yeah,
For sure.
but, like, but you have to move on, like the movie says. And you have to accept it and just remember the impact.
Right. Right. And you have to be. Yeah. And like we were saying at the doors, right, with the mom, it's like you have to be so thankful for the time that you do have, but you can't just stay there. You have to be able to go forward, which is that's so tough. And it's like this person that you enjoy and you love their art, and they're saying like this is it, this is the last one, and you're like, ah, well, shoot, like that's, yeah, I guess so. And then you got to try to, you know, find it elsewhere. And but I also think that there's um what's so cool about that is um you're not the only one that is watching it, right? There's someone that, has watched this movie, The Boy and the Heron, and they're going to go on and do something awesome. And they're going to be inspired by that
Yeah,
and create something else and create their own world. And there are people right now that have been inspired by Spirited Away or Nausicaa of the Valley, and they're creating, awesome things now. And um, yeah, so just because, one thing is ending, you shouldn't just stop there, but you should keep going forward and seeing what else is out there.
yeah,
Definitely.
100%.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah,
I think that was a successful deep dive
Right?
into.
yeah,
We could even
deep
say that
dive.
we're like the bottom of the ocean, like we found it.
Right, right. Just a small little look.
Yeah, into
Yeah,
that was The Boy and the Heron. I think maybe you could watch Yeah, I think we successfully like surpassed the length of the movie. So
Did we? That's
I
great.
think
yeah,
so.
That's right. And yeah, no, that's great. I love it.
So yeah, I guess with that we'll wrap things up. Liz or Adam, do either of you have anything you want to shout out?
Yeah, I do an awesome podcast with my buddy Mike over on the Retro Logic Discord page. Our podcast is called Film Logic, and you can get it on all your usual sites. You can get it on Spotify and iTunes and all that sort of stuff. And we just finished up talking about some American animation. We were talking about I don't know if you guys have seen movies like Kubo and the Two Strings, and so like that animation studio. And we're coming up in January. I think we're gonna we usually talk about anime movies and stuff in January, so more anime stuff to come. And yeah, so if you enjoyed even a little bit of what I had to say, feel free to come check us out. We'd love to have you.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Huh? Oh, you said. Sorry, I thought you said something else.
No, you're good.
Okay. Liz, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Well,
No.
I'll shout out the Gamer Girl podcast. Is a gaming podcast that Beth and I do, and if chances are, if you found Purple Riolu, you probably already knew about that, but just a little shout out there. Yeah, so that has been The Boy and the Heron. Thank you if you made it this far. You were unbelievable.
God bless.
Literally, yes, literally round of applause to you. Let's think of something to put in the comment section if you've made it. I don't even know.
What's Ghibli? What's Ghibli themed?
Watch Ghibli.
Yeah.
Nah, I don't. Who knows?
Share what share new anime. I'm always looking for new stuff recommendations. So maybe share what you're watching.
Yeah. Okay.
Good idea.
Well,
alrighty.
With that, thanks again. Thank you, both of you, for coming on. This has been awesome.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. This was fun.
Yeah, right. Maybe we talk about free rent next. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
That would be so cool.
Okay.
See?
I'll binge it tonight.
Do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Started a Crunchyroll subscription.
Right.
I need to. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many other good shows as well.
So good.
For real. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, once again, thanks. And everyone, have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, night, whatever it is.
Twilight.
3 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Goodbye.
bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.